Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Foreign Correspondent Club of Japan. My name is Pio D'Emilia. At my side here, Andy Sharp from Nikkei Asia. Today we are introducing a very important event. Thank you, Minister Wu, for getting with us. Minister of Foreign Affairs of Taiwan is joining us on a very exclusive appointment. We have been working very hard to make this happen, and we are very happy and very proud to introduce this event. Thank you, Minister Joseph Wu, for being with us. I don't think that we are already late for some technical reasons, so I don't think the minister needs particular introduction. We all know the issue of Taiwan, what Taiwan is and represents. Minister Wu, I think we met many years ago when you were the mainland responsible with Chen Shui-bian president. And I remember you once told me that was going to be your last mandate and you would quit politics. But as we all know, politicians do change their mind. Okay, welcome again. And today we will first listen to your speech on the alignment of Taiwan-Japan partnership in the face of modern challenges. And after that, we will have questions from the floor and online. We have already collected a lot of questions, so I hope that we will have enough time to ask them all. So, the microphone is yours, Minister.
Thank you. FCCJ Vice President Sharp, Mr. Pio D'Emilia, Deputy Representative Ambassador Tai, members of the Foreign Correspondents Club of Japan, greetings from Taiwan. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak. It gives me tremendous joy to remember the last time I spoke at the club in 2006 in person as a Minister of Men and Affairs. I'm quite happy to speak to the club again, this time as the Minister of Foreign Affairs. Before I start, I would like to express my appreciation to the members for bringing quality report about Japan to the world. Your work is critically important, not only for us outside Japan to know Japan better, but also for us to understand how to make adjustment in the ever-changing international landscape based on your report. Indeed, the international landscape has gone through tremendous changes in the last few years. Strategic competition and rivalry between democratic countries and authoritarianism is apparent. It is especially so after the outbreak of COVID. The Chinese regime further exploited the pandemic to impose their political agenda on many others. In parts of Europe, Africa, and South Asia, the Belt and Road Initiative already allowed the Chinese government to exercise its influence. But it also left a trail of debt, corruption, and erosion of democratic governance. We are seeing the awakening of many democracies. Some in Western Europe and the EU itself are formulating their own versions of the Indo-Pacific strategy. Some in Eastern Europe are calling for the withdrawal from 17+1. Many around the world are calling for clean 5G by rejecting Huawei. Some European countries are now sending naval vessels to the Western Pacific for freedom of navigation operations and holding joint exercises with Japan and the US. In Central and South America, from what I have observed, vaccine diplomacy is creating divisions within countries as they scramble to curb the pandemic. And it gives the Chinese government an opportunity to exert its influence in the Western Hemisphere. As we speak, China is providing quick access to the Chinese-made vaccines, anti-pandemic resources, as well as development funding to those who are willing to accept political partnership with Beijing. China then uses this partnership to lure or pressure those allies of Taiwan and the US to lean toward Beijing. Through these maneuverings, China is trying to gain political influence in the region at the cost of Taiwan and the US. Again, from what I have observed, the strategic competition is taking place in this area, and we have to understand the ramification on the strategic interest of the fellow democracies if the trend is not dealt with. The strategic rivalry is most obvious in the Indo-Pacific. The authoritarian regime is flexing its economic and military muscles, deploying hybrid warfare tactics to project wider influence over the region. Moreover, tensions continue to rise in the East and South China Seas. Gray zone tactics, excessive maritime claims, and maritime militias carrying out operations at the order of the military. The CCP regime is exploiting all means possible to induce clashes just below the threshold of a major war. The situation is worsening around Taiwan. The military threat and coercion, infiltration, influence operation, gray zone tactics, and massive disinformation campaign are all designed to erode the public support of democratic institutions, and the threat is escalating rapidly. If we read the tension in the Indo-Pacific as a consequence of the expansion of the Chinese authoritarian regime, I think you will agree with me that Taiwan is on the front line of that expansionism, and Taiwan is the focal point of the ideological rivalry between democracy and authoritarianism. We in Taiwan understand our responsibility not only protect our sovereignty, but also to safeguard a free and democratic Taiwan not falling into the hands of authoritarianism. The government and people of Taiwan are absolutely committed to self-defense. But of course, we want better and more cooperative relations with the like-minded fellow democracies to strengthen our capabilities in meeting common challenges. Taiwan and Japan share the values of freedom, democracy, human rights protection, and the rule of law. And over the years, we have proven to be friends in times of trouble. Whenever a major disaster took place, we have always come to the other's aid as soon as possible. The spirit of mutual support and affinity between the two peoples form a solid foundation for the two countries to enhance ties. There are also issue areas where our partnership can benefit not just ourselves, but the broader region. Under the current international strategic landscape, we should speed up the process of restructuring supply chains. The pandemic has undermined the risk of over-reliance on a single source of supply. Taiwan and Japan both boast top-notch technology talents, and a closer collaboration of our industries can create synergies beyond our imagination. The same goes with trade. Australia's case of wine, lobster, barley, and coal exports is a reminder of the urgent need of diversification on trade. And for this matter, I would like to emphasize Taiwan's intention to join the CPTPP. Deeper regional integration is the key to buttress individual countries' defense against trade retaliation. Solidarity and cooperation are critical in deterring authoritarian aggression. We were pleased to welcome Japan on board of the Global Cooperation Training Framework, or GCTF, as a full partner in 2019. It is a platform to train officials and experts in the region on global issues such as public health, environment, digital economy, women's empowerment, and so on. It also the first platform calling for global attention on disinformation and its impact on democracies. We also look forward to working with Japan, the US, and other like-minded countries through this platform to pull international efforts to address other critical non-traditional security issues, such as cybersecurity, energy security, marine debris, law enforcement, and humanitarian assistance and disaster relief. Through GCTF, I'm very proud to say Taiwan and Japan have formed a strong partnership to jointly take on regional challenges. I would also like to emphasize that Taiwan is grateful for Japan's increased gestures to support Taiwan publicly. Japan's call for Taiwan's inclusion in the World Health Organization is unequivocal. It is also working with other like-minded partners to take concrete actions in Geneva to quest for Taiwan's participation. The call for Taiwan's inclusion in the WHO was further written in the joint statement in the most recent G7 foreign ministers meeting. Japan's effort is highly appreciated. Recently, the mentioning of peace and stability over the Taiwan Strait in the joint statements for the US-Japan 2+2 and summit meetings, as well as Japan-EU summit, is highly significant. This makes Taiwanese people feel that we are not alone in confronting the authoritarian expansionism. We have friends giving us good support. Over the years, Japan has time and again showcased its admirable leadership in managing regional affairs. Now a key player in the CPTPP, the Quad, and G7, Japan holds the key to the sustainable peace and development of the Indo-Pacific. As for our part, Taiwan is a responsible member of the international community, and we are determined to contribute to all regional endeavors. Ladies and gentlemen, you and I are on the same boat in this battle to safeguard democracy and freedom of speech, and you can count on Taiwan to fulfill its responsibility to the world. I can assure you that to Japan and other fellow democracies, Taiwan will be a reliable partner and a force for good in maintaining a free and open Indo-Pacific. While democracy may not appear to be the most strongest form of civilization, it is by far the most resilient. And with solidarity, Taiwan and Japan will be stronger together. I have faith in the power of freedom and democracy, and I have faith that freedom and democracy will prevail. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister Wu. Now, thank you for keep your time. Now let's open it to the floor, first of all. But if you allow me, out of courtesy, I would like to ask the first question from our president, who is not here in person, but she's following this online on YouTube, and she sent this question. So let's start from the, to important questions. Terry Goh, the founder of Foxconn, has sought permission from the government to buy vaccines from BioNTech. Would Taiwan's government ever allow him or anyone else to purchase BioNTech vaccines through China's Fosun, or would they only be allowed directly from the German company?
Thank you very much for this question. Vaccine is an issue of the day in Taiwan. The government has been trying very hard to obtain vaccines through COVAX facility and also through individual discussions with the providers of vaccines. And so far, we are also preparing to roll out Taiwan's indigenous vaccines. And the vaccine provisions seem to be on schedule. But of course, the providing vaccines seems to be delayed, and it's not just in Taiwan, but also in many parts of the world because of the high demand these days. And we are trying to speed up the procurement of vaccines and also our domestic vaccines to meet the demand of the people here in Taiwan. For some individuals or organizations who are willing to work together with the government, they are all welcomed. And this is a statement put out by the president that we will work with civic organizations, local government, or organizations and individuals to obtain vaccines for Taiwan's use. Nevertheless, many of the vaccine providers and the international community, they would only accept contracts with the government. And if the individuals or organizations here in Taiwan would like to work with the government to obtain vaccines, they are always welcomed. And right now, Foxconn's Terry Kuo is working with our Ministry of Health in trying to negotiate with the BNT in obtaining vaccines. And of course, the government's negotiation with the BNT is still ongoing.
Thank you. Okay, from the floor, who wants to ask questions? Don't be shy. Please. Look wherever you want, but state your name and your affiliation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Minister, for appearing at the FCCJ. I think we met at the same time when Pio was visiting during the elections, and we had photos in your office. Good to see you again. My name is Khaldoun Azhari. I'm with Panorate News and Arabic News. My question is actually about the issues related to the region. We host many press conferences recently from activists and some also representative of organizations. They are calling for kind of independence of Uyghur area and Tibet and Inner Mongolia and maybe other parts. So if their wish is granted, China's size will be half of its current size. And we know that Chinese government accused these people of a crime of trying to divide China. So what is Taiwan's position on these three main issues, like the Inner Mongolia and the Tibet and the Uyghur, that is raised by the international community, that there is kind of ethnic cleansing? And frankly, I watch sometimes the Chinese Arabic program, and it shows everything in that area is very beautiful and nice, and people are happy. So I'm wondering, what is your position on that? Thank you.
Thank you, Khaldoun. Minister?
Appreciate it very much for that question. I think the issue related to Xinjiang, Tibet, Inner Mongolia, or Hong Kong is about freedom and democracy, especially freedom of speech. Something that all international journalists care very much about. If you look at what happened in Xinjiang these days, is the Chinese imposition of very extreme control over the region. And the kinds of measures adopted by the Chinese government has been described by many countries in the world as crimes against humanity or genocide. But no matter what, Xinjiang is a very beautiful place, as you said, and people over there are distinctive from the Chinese race, and they also have their own separate religious beliefs. And in all free societies or democratic societies, everybody is free to have their worships, free to express their opinions. They are free to form their organizations, free to participate in politics, and should be that. And if you look at what happened in Xinjiang and in Tibet and also in Hong Kong, we are seeing the situation is deteriorating. And let me also comment on Hong Kong. Hong Kong used to be seen as a beacon of freedom and also free economy in East Asia. But after the imposition of national security law, I think all that freedom is gone. Even those elected officials are disqualified. And many people describe that as a current day tragedy. And we hate to see that happen. And of course, the most important of all is to allow freedom to be restored in all this region so that people can go on their lives without political persecution. And we would support the international endeavor to free those people, to allow them freedom of speech and their political freedom.
Thank you, Minister. Any other question from the floor? Otherwise, I would, in your honor, today we started this kind of new thing for us, a double emceeing. So I will leave the microphone to my colleague, Andy, for asking questions that have came through online. Andy, dozo.
Okay there. Hi. This is a question from my colleague, Cheng Ting Fang in Taipei at Nikkei Asia. She's asking about vaccines again. And as you know, Japan is, looking possibly to share some of its excess vaccines with other countries Could you say whether Taiwan has been in negotiations with the Japanese government to receive some vaccines, and give us a status report on that? Thank you.
Minister?
Well, thank you very much for that question. As I said in the speech itself, Taiwan and Japan are always very good partners, and in times of difficulties, we always try to reach out to each other. Just as Foreign Minister Motegi Sensei said the other day, Taiwan was trying to help Japan during the 2011 earthquake and tsunami, and I think many Japanese people remember that. So he commented that it's time for Japan to seriously and positively consider the donation of vaccines for Taiwan. For that statement, we really appreciate what the Japanese government is serious considering providing Taiwan with vaccines. But we don't have any further comment other than what I just said. But I would like to stress again, Taiwan and Japan are very good friends with each other. And at times of need, especially natural disasters, we always try to reach out to each other. And we will maintain that kind of close relations with each other. And because of the friendship, very strong bond in between Taiwan and Japan, it formed a very solid foundation for the two countries to develop better relations with each other. Thank you again.
Another question from the floor, from online?
Sure. I've got a question here from Jesse Johnson at the Japan Times. Well, two questions, actually. So the first question is, do you expect former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe to visit Taiwan at any point soon? And what do you think such a visit could accomplish? And the second question, a recent study by the Wilson Center think tank recommended that Japan prioritizes substantive cooperation that enhances Taiwan's security, prosperity, and resilience against external coercion, and which proactively engages Taiwan as a valued partner in efforts to positively shape the region's free and open future. Specifically, what do you think Japan could do on this security side of things in this kind of cooperation? So two questions there. Thank you.
Appreciate it very much for those two questions. Prime Minister Abe is a very good friend of Taiwan and is a good friend of many of the senior government officials. And his support for Taiwan is very apparent. And many people here in Taiwan just appreciate him very much. And whenever he feels convenient to visit Taiwan, he is always welcomed. And I will personally welcome him as well. But at this moment, we don't have any concrete plan for bringing him to Taiwan, and we'll continue to listen to his opinion on when is more convenient for him or when is more appropriate for him. But whenever he's ready, Taiwan will be ready to welcome him. And on the second question, as you say, Wilson Center has indeed made that kind of recommendation. But I would like to stress on 2 points. The first is that security of Taiwan, especially dealing with the hard military security issues, we would like to stress that the defense of Taiwan is our own responsibility. We are committed to our own self-defense. We'll try to procure the necessary self-defense articles for our own self-defense, and we would also like to engage in our own military reforms to meet the demand of our own self-defense. And we would also like to continue to work together with like-minded countries like the United States on how to enhance our defense capabilities. Nevertheless, Taiwan and Japan have been working with each other under the GCTF, the Global Cooperation and Training Framework, in dealing with many of the non-traditional security issues. To me, that is just as important as the traditional security issues. On the issue of disinformation, on HADR, on many other non-traditional security issues that as I listed in the speech, Taiwan and Japan have been working very well under the GCTF, and that is not only contributing to our better relations in dealing with these non-traditional security issues, but we are also making contributions to the region. Take cybersecurity, for example. We have holding workshops in dealing with that under the GCTF, and I think we are benefiting many of the government officials and also experts in this region in dealing with that issue. And as I said in the speech, disinformation is nowadays a very serious issue for us to deal with. At the time, Taiwan was trying to confront the pandemic. We are also seeing a very massive disinformation originating from China, and we have the experience in dealing with that. And therefore, we would like to work together with Japan or the United States or other like-minded countries on how to deal with the disinformation issue. So again, non-traditional security issues is just as important, and we would like to work with Japan and many other like-minded countries in dealing with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Can I follow up another question online that comes from Italy, from Il Foglio, Giulia Pompili? Is another question on the vaccines. Who has currently, WHO has currently accepted the 2 different vaccines from the People's Republic for emergency use. They will also be used for the COVAX consortium. Taiwan is receiving vaccines through COVAX. If they offered you Chinese vaccines through COVAX, would you distribute it?
Well, this is a hypothetical issue so far. So probably there's not much to say about this issue. But we are producing our own issues, and we have strong confidence in our own vaccines. And when and if our vaccines roll out toward the end of July, I think they will become the most important supply for the vaccine demand here in Taiwan. But we are also negotiating with individual companies like Pfizer or Moderna or Johnson & Johnson and AZ's to secure our own vaccines. So far, the vaccines provided by COVAX is a very small amount, and they are not very in time. And I don't think the COVAX is going to provide Taiwan with more vaccines at this moment.
Following up on the WHO, Minister, recently France Parliament and the G7 foreign ministers from many parts of the world, there is a strong support, a strong pledge to WHO to finally, eventually accept Taiwan official membership. Can you say something to us about this issue? Do you expect any change in the short time?
Again, thank you very much for this question. This is the question people feel very strongly about. And we are also getting a lot of international support on this issue. Before I comment on the international support, I would like to stress on 2 very important factors on Taiwan's participation in the WHO. For the first one, excluding Taiwan is not fair to the Taiwanese people. We have 23 million people living in Taiwan. And therefore, we are entitled to participate in the WHO just like any other nation. WHO should not exclude Taiwan at all. We hope we can get support from the WHO or get updated information from the WHO at the time when Taiwan needs it. The second factor is Taiwan can also contribute to the international community on the health issue if there's a need for Taiwan. And so far, we are not able to make any contribution through the WHO. And I think it's not fair to the rest of the world as well. And based on these 2 factors, I think the international community is calling for the WHO to include Taiwan. And that is highly appreciated. And if you look at the support for Taiwan last year and this year, we are gaining more and more international support. If you look at Japan, we have the Prime Minister, we have the Chief Cabinet Minister, and also the Foreign Minister and Health Minister calling for Taiwan's inclusion in the WHO. And if you look at the international actors, there are more and more senior leaders of individual countries coming out to call for Taiwan's inclusion in the WHO. For example, the Australian key decision makers, the New Zealand, the Canadian Prime Minister, and etc. And we are also seeing more and more senior officials in Europe coming out to call for Taiwan's inclusion. So this is the kind of situation that we have been seeing in the last couple of years. In addition, we are also seeing the parliamentarians across the world calling for Taiwan's inclusion in the WHO. For this year alone, we have more than 3,000 parliamentarians across the world calling for the WHO, calling on the WHO to include Taiwan. And it's our belief that once there are enough countries in the world asking for the WHO to include Taiwan to participate as a member or as an observer, I think it will be time for Taiwan to be included. We will work again and again with the like-minded countries to make sure Taiwan's voice is heard on the international stage. And we will make sure that the name Taiwan will be mentioned again and again in international meetings whenever the international health issue is discussed. And so far, we are very happy that Taiwan's participation in the WHO has been mentioned by many international meetings, and that is helping the Taiwanese people. And for that, we really appreciate it.
There is a question from the floor, please.
Hello, my name is Ariel Buzeto from Japan Forward. I have two questions. The first one that I have is for people who are not as familiar perhaps on the domestic situation in Taiwan, could you please explain exactly what is the bottleneck in getting, for example, vaccines from Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, and so on? What is blocking the negotiations, basically? And the second question that I have is perhaps one that you can't answer, but I'm going to try and ask it anyway. So obviously there was just the COVAX summit on the 1st of June, and it looks like the acute phase of the pandemic will perhaps be within reach the next year, will end the next year or so. But if there's anything that has come to the fore during this pandemic is vaccine politics, right? So Taiwan is a great example of this. What does Taiwan wish that the international community did, apart obviously from like putting them in the WHO? And is there anything that particularly Taiwan wishes to do, for example, with Japan? Thank you.
On the first issue, the bottleneck of vaccine coming to Taiwan, the vaccine supplies coming to Taiwan, I would like to stress again that this is not just an issue that Taiwan is facing. This is an issue many countries in the world are facing. If you look at the demand of many countries in Central America or South America or many other countries, I think they are also hoping to receive vaccines from individual providers, corporations, from Johnson & Johnson, from Pfizer, from BNT, or from NZs. So this is a situation similar. The situation in Taiwan is similar to many countries in the world. But when facing with this issue, I think the government here is working very hard to persuade the international community that Taiwan is facing a very unique situation. And it's just not a public health issue. It's also a national security issue. And it's also a security for international economy. For example, Taiwan is under a relentless attack of disinformation campaign. And I think this disinformation campaign is designed to erode the public support for Taiwan's democratic institutions. And therefore, you can see there's only one force that would like to erode and attack Taiwan's democratic institutions. So we hope that the international community, the providers of vaccines, can look at this situation in a more serious way. And of course, Taiwan government's responsibility is to negotiate in a very serious way for the supply of vaccines to Taiwan in a timely manner. And of course, as I said a little bit earlier, Taiwan is also rolling out its own domestic vaccines, its indigenous vaccines. And in the earlier phase of first test and the second test, they seem to be working very effectively. And if Taiwan can start rolling out its own vaccines for Taiwan's domestic use, maybe we can also export some of our own vaccines to help other countries. So this is the vaccine issue. And the second issue is on the COVAX. In the meetings last year of the COVAX facility, we also tried to provide some contributions, try to work with the COVAX, but unfortunately, China seems to be trying to block Taiwan's participation, and this is most unfortunate. We always try to help the international community. You know, we try to provide funding to fight Ebola. We try to provide funding in fighting for other public health crises in other parts of the world. But so far, our help has been rejected by the WHO or by other mechanisms, and it's very unfortunate. And we will continue to find ways of supporting the international mechanism in dealing with the public health issue. And for pandemic containment, let me stress a little bit further. We all know that vaccines is the final guard against the resurgence or the final containment of the vaccines. It's very important. There's no doubt about it. But before that pandemic is contained, there are also other ways of fighting or containing the vaccines. And I think the Taiwanese government has been working very hard. So far, we have imposed some restrictions. It's not a lockdown, but there's some restrictions on public gatherings. The alert is at the level 3. And I think we seem to have contained the virus so far. We see the spike is leveling off, and the experts here in Taiwan is saying that we seem to be doing a fair job in containing the virus from seeing the spike shooting rocket high. So this is a situation in Taiwan. We'll continue to use other mechanisms in dealing with the pandemic issue. And at the same time, because of our own experience in dealing with the pandemic, we would like to work together with other countries to make sure the international fight against the pandemic is being dealt with not only by vaccines, but also by other mechanisms of containing the virus.
Andy, do we have other questions from online?
We do. We have a question here from Hong Kong, from Linda Liu at the South China Morning Post. In recent months, several US military officials have repeatedly warned of the military threat posed by China to Taiwan, adding that this threat could materialize more quickly than expected. You know, a cynical view of this is that it is a drumbeat for more defense spending. But putting that aside, can you elaborate on exactly what is convincing the US military that this threat is imminent? That is, what has happened exactly? An event, a speech, new intelligence? What seems to have changed the tone? And following up to that, if such a conflict broke out, what exactly does Taiwan expect from Japan? And what does Taiwan specifically expect from the United States? Thank you.
That is a very good question. And that is a question many countries in the world are asking, and many international journalists are also asking us. We don't really anticipating that the conflict or a war is going to break out anytime soon. But we're trying to get ourselves ready. Whether the war is going to take place tomorrow or 6 years later or 10 years later, we need to prepare ourselves. And so far, our MND, in fact, you know, the whole government has been trying very hard in making sure that we are prepared for a military conflict in between Taiwan and China. What we need, as I said a little bit earlier, is an absolute commitment of the Taiwanese government in defending itself. And I can tell you that we are absolutely committed to defend ourselves. And as I said a little bit earlier, defending Taiwan is our own responsibility. And we are absolutely committed in our self-defense. And other than that, we also try to talk with fellow democracies or the most important partner, the United States, on how we can procure the needed defense articles for our own self-defense. And in the last few years, the negotiations for Taiwan to obtain defensive weapons from the United States has been going very well. The discussions in between Taiwan and the United States for the sale of weapons is now a regular procedure. And whenever we place a request, it's always being discussed in the United States in a timely manner. And now we need to also look at ourselves and how we can change our strategy from a traditional way of defense into a more symmetrical way of defense. And I think we are making tremendous progress on this issue. And of course, we need to engage with the United States in the security discussions with each other to see what is the blind side of Taiwan that we need to make improvement upon. And so far, the discussions between Taiwan and the United States have been going very well. And I would like to stress again that Taiwan views its own defense as its own responsibility. So if there's going to be a war in between Taiwan and China, we will fight the war ourselves. And if other countries will come to our aid, that will be highly appreciated. But we will fight the war for our own survival and for our own future.
Minister, let's all hope that the war does not erupt, of course.
I agree with you. I agree with you.
How does Taiwan economic strength improve substantially to aim at benefiting all Taiwanese, despite the nationalist tendency to align with the communist China?
Well, Taiwan's economy has been doing rather well up until today. For example, for last year's statistics, there was a global downturn because of the pandemic. But because of the successful containment of the pandemic, Taiwan's economy was able to maintain at a growth rate that is admirable to many countries in the world, especially in the high-tech area. Taiwan is, continuously to be a very reliable supplier of high-tech equipment and of computer chips to the world, and we will continue to do that. And so far, even though we see some spikes of the coronavirus, but so far, the trend has been leveling off, and we seem to be doing a fair job in containing the virus. And therefore, we would expect Taiwan's economy to continue to perform well. And so far, we are seeing that Taiwan's economic growth is going to remain the same. And as you say, that Taiwan's economic integration with China is a trend that cannot be ignored. We trade with China, and that is a fact. And we made investment in China. That is also the fact. But those investors in China, or those who trade with China, now they see the possibility of China's economic downturn. And they also see the economic conflict in between the United States and China. And therefore, many of the investors or traders with China now, they are looking at other alternatives. They are either coming back to Taiwan, or they want to find another alternatives like investment in the United States, in South America, or in Southeast Asia or South Asia. But no matter where they want to go, Taiwanese government will try to assist them so that they can still go to a place where they can make profit. So this is a natural trend. But we also want to be able to participate in regional economic mechanism, trade mechanism, such as CPTPP, or to have closer economic ties with individual countries for free trade agreement. And so far, we have already expressed our sincere interest in participating in the CPTPP. And we appreciate many governments in the world, especially the Japanese government, who welcomed Taiwan's interest in participating in CPTPP. And we will find the right timing to tender our request for participation. And at the same time, we will also speak to other countries or EU, Australia or Japan or Canada, and etc. For better economic and trade relations with each other. We would like to discuss a free trade agreement, ECA, EPA, or investment agreement, etc., to make sure that Taiwan is further integrated with other fellow democracies with markets that are more open.
Any other question from the floor?
I have one here.
One?
I have one here.
Oh, please.
Okay, it's a follow-up from my colleague in Taipei. So if there continues to be a delay in COVAX vaccines, would Taiwan consider some kind of deal where they trade semiconductors for vaccines with countries such as Germany or the United States, a vaccine for chips kind of deal? Would that be a possibility?
Well, this is a very good question. There's a public opinion, very strong public opinion, to use chips in exchange for vaccines. But in the real business world, it might not operate that way. We try to let the providers of vaccines to understand Taiwan's contributions to the international community, because Taiwan has been providing computer chips to many countries. For example, in the automobile industries, there was a real shortage earlier this year because of the shortage of the computer chips. And it's not because of Taiwan that doesn't want to supply computer chips, but because the providers in this process thought that there's going to be a significant slowdown in the automobile industry, and therefore they did not make any order for the computer chips, and that created the current day crisis. But after speaking with the automobile industries, speaking with individual countries like the United States or Germany, we understand that we can make a little adjustment of our chip production in order to save the international industries, especially the automobile industries. And so far, we have been quite generous in doing that. And I think the automobile industries in the United States or Germany understand Taiwan's contribution in that regard. But at the same time, the vaccine issue is also a very serious one. And Taiwan is facing a shortage of vaccines. And of course, we would like to speak to a BNT or other providers of vaccines so that the supply of vaccines can be speed up. And so far, the negotiation is still going on. And I would like to say that the German government is trying to help in this process as well. And for that matter, we express our appreciation. And I would also like to say that the U.S. government has also been very supportive of Taiwan acquiring sufficient amount of vaccines. And for that, I would also like to register my appreciation to the U.S. government. But many of the vaccines production or producers, they operate in the business sense. And therefore, the negotiations may not be as easy as we think that we can swap computer chips for vaccines.
Minister, let's try to open up the questions, except of vaccines until now. It's not so often that Taiwan voice can be heard around the world. Taiwan represents a very, very advanced democracy, I would say, in Asia. Nevertheless, it's still not very recognized, this fact, from the rest of the world. You have a very open policy about LGBT issues. You have even a transgender minister. And you have death penalty, which is on moratoria, if I'm not wrong. Very developed democratic society. How would you comment on the fact that this is not so much reported abroad and that Taiwan is almost absent from media reports about this?
Appreciate for saying that. Indeed, a few years ago, Taiwan was much less reported in the international media. Whenever there's a report about Taiwan, there's either conflict with China or China's military threat against Taiwan, or there's a natural disaster like earthquake or flooding here in Taiwan. So this is the situation that we see. Some people even tell us that they confuse Taiwan with Thailand. So this is the fact of life that we have to deal with. But beginning from last year, I would say that Taiwan is more and more reported by the international community. First, as Taiwan being the first country to send out email to the WHO alerting that there's something wrong in Wuhan area, that there's something similar to SARS. Taiwan was affected by SARS in 2003, and it was a nightmare for us to relieve that kind of a situation. And therefore, we alerted the WHO, even though we are not the WHO did not respond to us, but somebody started to notice that Taiwan is the first country to alert the WHO. And Taiwan is gaining more attention by the international community. And after a while, when Taiwan's domestic production of face masks and other PPEs are becoming self-sufficient, we started providing the international community with these PPEs. We are not selling to the international community. We are contributing to the international community, donating to many countries in the world. I don't remember how many millions of medical masks that we have provided to the international community. And therefore, the reports about Taiwan last year seem to be more and more in a much more positive manner. And we started seeing the international press demanding that the WHO to include Taiwan to participate in the WHO so that Taiwan's experience in containing the virus can be shared by the international community. And so far, there are still many countries reporting about Taiwan, for Taiwan, what Taiwan as a democracy, or for Taiwan's being under threat, Chinese relentless threat against Taiwan, or for Taiwan's ability to produce a high percentage of computer chips in the world. It will continue to make strides in Taiwan's on the international stage. And I would also like to say that being a Minister of Foreign Affairs, it's also my responsibility to make sure that there are international media who can come and see me, who have access to me, so that Taiwan's voice can be heard. And I would like to be an agent for Taiwan's voice to be heard as well. And we have many friends around the world. We have friendship groups in the parliaments in Europe, in the United States, in Central and South America, and also in Japan, Australia, New Zealand, etc. And they are also Taiwan's best friends in helping Taiwan's voice heard. And we will continue that friendship to make sure that Taiwan's voice is heard in the world. And I think you are right, that Taiwan is a democracy. And this is something that we are very proud of, especially from the DPP, the Democratic Progressive Party, who is pushing the authoritarian aside to establish Taiwan as a democracy. We are very proud to be able to establish Taiwan as a firm democracy. And this is a factor. Many people in the world started calling Taiwan a shining beacon of model for democracy. And the United States and many countries in the world are also saying that Taiwan is a success story, democratic success story. And we understand that Taiwan's own responsibility, not only to protect our own democratic way of life, we want to make sure that Taiwan's experience of democracy and freedom can also be shared by many people in the world.
Thank you, Minister. Since we started a little bit late, can you stay with us another 5 minutes for another couple of questions? Thank you very much.
No.
Okay, Andy, you have a question, and then Khaldun.
Very quick question, and it's a question that everyone's on the top of everyone's mind in Tokyo right now. It's to do with the Olympics. Taiwan's baseball team pulled out of a qualifying tournament in Mexico because of COVID fears. So do you see there is a possibility that, under what circumstances would Taiwan not send athletes to Tokyo for the Olympics later this year?
That is a very important question. You mentioned about the baseball team not going to the tournament and then finally going to the final. The reason is because our baseball team found that we are not able to practice baseball because of the level 3 alert and the restrictions by Taiwan side. And therefore, they abandoned their opportunity in going to Mexico. Nevertheless, we understand that the Japanese government and the International Olympic Committee have been working very hard in making sure that the Olympics can take place in Tokyo. And that kind of spirit is highly appreciated. And we are also staying in very close touch with the Japanese government and also with the International Olympic Committee. And Taiwan's athletes have been practicing, and their opportunity is to win gold medals in the Olympics. And therefore, Taiwanese government will continue to stay in touch with the Japanese government and also the International Olympic Committee to make sure that if it's still taking place, our athletes will also have an opportunity to participate in the games.
Minister, you were talking before about Taiwan friends. Let's talk about countries that are recognizing you. Recently, you have lost a couple of countries. If I'm not wrong, now you have only 15 or 14 countries that officially recognizes you diplomatically. And among those, most probably the Holy See, the Vatican, is your best asset, if I could say so. Do you foresee a further campaign by China to isolate you more from the international community, or do you hope to increase it? And following up on the Holy See, you know very well that the Pope wants to go to China. Do you think that a compromise can be achieved, that they can still have a relationship with you and go to China?
Thank you very much for that question. Taiwan's diplomatic allies, even though the number is limited, but we treasure the friendship, we treasure the support that the diplomatic allies is providing to Taiwan, especially in the area. Taiwan absolutely needs it. Taiwan's voice to be heard on the international community, especially in the WHO, in UN, ICAO, or UNFCCC. And our diplomatic allies have been helping us in that regard, and we appreciate that very much. And no matter how many diplomatic allies we have, we will fight very hard to maintain our diplomatic relations with these allies. And the reason why we want to maintain diplomatic relations with these allies, not just to ensure that Taiwan's voice to be heard in the international community, we also want to highlight to the international community that there is such thing as Taiwan model for international assistance. We try to help many of our diplomatic allies in the area that they need in their national development. For example, in medical treatment, in agriculture, in job training, in higher education, and etc. And our diplomatic allies highly appreciate what we have been trying to help them. In one of the areas Taiwan is most successful is to help some countries in digitizing their health system. It saves time for them and it saves lives. So we would like to expand our experience on that as well in order to maintain our diplomatic relations. And you also asked whether we are going to increase the number of countries recognizing Taiwan. We don't have any limitations on that. If there is any country in the world that think Taiwan is a reliable partner and they want to recognize Taiwan, we don't rule out that possibility. But so far, I don't have any new stories to tell on that part, but we will continue to safeguard our diplomatic relations with the ones that we have. And it's a very good point that you asked about the Vatican. Our relations with Vatican is still very solid. We speak with each other at a very high level constantly. And so far, we've been assured that Taiwan's diplomatic relations with the Vatican is not going to change, even though that's reaching out to China to discuss some agreement or to extend the agreement. The discussions that we were told by the officials in the Vatican is about the religious matter. It's not about political matter or diplomatic matter. And we also believe that the relations what we have with the Vatican is to safeguard the freedom of religion in Taiwan, in China, or in anywhere else in the world. But if we look at the situation in China, we saw that the freedom of religion has been tarnished in China. And that is a factor that we not only Taiwan, but also Vatican and many other countries have seen. And we will work with like-minded countries and the Vatican to address the religious freedom issue in China.
I think we have a last question from the floor, and then we'll wrap up. Khaldun, you want to ask, hopefully not on vaccines.
Thank you, Azhar, again. I remember Taiwan took a decision to freeze nuclear energy, and you don't want any more nuclear reactors. What's the latest about this policy, and what is Taiwan's position on releasing water from Fukushima Daiichi reactors to the sea? Some countries in Asia, especially Korea, protested against that. Thank you.
There are two issues involved in this question. The first is Taiwan's policy in freezing the nuclear power plant expansion. Our policy of decommissioning all nuclear power plant by year 2025 hasn't changed. And we'll continue that policy. And we are building more and more renewable energy supplies here in Taiwan. And so far, everything is going very smoothly. And we hope that by year 2025, we will have at least 20% of our energy supply coming from the renewable. And this goal is still there. And we'll continue to work very hard. For those people who have an opportunity to visit Taiwan before the COVID, I'm sure they have noticed that there are more and more windmills coming up in the western coastal areas, and that represent the future of Taiwan energy supply. And we are also building up more and more solar power plants, and that is also going to be part of our future energy supplies here in Taiwan. And we'll continue to discuss with Japan, the European countries, or even Australia for renewables, for the further development of renewable energy supplies to meet our future demand. And I think it is very good that you mentioned about the Fukushima wastewater, nuclear power plant wastewater issue. That is an issue that many people here in Taiwan cares quite a lot about. One demand from Taiwan that is being made very clear to the Japanese government is that we hope the discharge of the wastewater is in accordance to the IAEA standard. And we will make sure that the Japanese government is staying in very close communication with us, that they are staying in line with the IAEA standards. And we also hope that the Taiwanese experts can also go visit the sites together with the Japanese experts to assess the situation. And there can be IAEA expert teams going to Fukushima area. We certainly hope that the Taiwanese experts can be included as well. And of course, there are lots of environment monitoring mechanism in the area to make sure that the release or discharge of the wastewater is not damaging the environment. We hope we can stay in touch with those experts or organizations to make sure Taiwan is not ill affected by the discharge of wastewater from Fukushima area. But so far, the Japanese government has been very helpful in communicating with Taiwan's related government agencies, including the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Thank you, Minister. I think we are now to the very last question. You wouldn't expect me to release you without the question. As not only as a foreign minister, but as a PhD holder in political sciences, I'm sure you know very well what are the requisites for defining a country independent. A territory, population controlled, government, a currency, an army, borders. You got them all. You have also the same conductors. What does Taiwan lack yet to be called an independent nation?
Actually, we are not short of anything. What is there that is blocking Taiwan's international participation, or Taiwan to be recognized by more countries in the world, or official interactions with many countries in the world, is China. You know that very well. Taiwan operates by itself. Taiwan is not under China's jurisdiction. We have our own military defending ourselves. We have the Ministry of Foreign Affairs issuing passport and visa. And we also have our own independent currency, which is New Taiwan dollar. And we have many friends in the international community who want to come to Taiwan through the approval of the Taiwanese government, not through the Chinese government. So that all show one thing, that Taiwan is not part of China, not part of the PRC. Taiwan exists by itself. And so far, this is the reality. And we would like to safeguard this status quo, that Taiwan is not invaded, that Taiwan is not ruled by the communist regime in China. And I think the people here in Taiwan would also like to maintain this status quo. Whenever we have a public opinion issue to ask people in this area, absolute majority of the people here in Taiwan would like to safeguard the status quo that we have right now. And if the question is asked whether they would accept one country, two system model imposed by the Chinese government, absolute majority of the people here in Taiwan say no. So I think the people here are quite happy with the way we are, with the way that Taiwan is not ruled by the communist Chinese regime. And we hope that the international community can be aware of that and can come to Taiwan's help in supporting Taiwan not to be ruled by the communist Chinese.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you for staying with us. We have a custom here at the Foreign Correspondents Club to give honorary membership to our guest speakers, but physically we don't know how to deliver this. Shall you send somebody here to pick it up, or shall we send it by post? Of course, not through China. I mean, would you give us an address where we can send it through your office here in Taiwan? Okay.
Well, thank you very much.
Or maybe one of us can come to Taiwan and bring it in person.
Yes, that would be very good. I appreciate it very much for sending that token of appreciation to me. Actually, my favorite cup, and I'm still using it every day, is a cup that is given to me by the foreign correspondents in Taiwan. And that shows how much I appreciate to have an opportunity to interact with Foreign Correspondents Club in Taiwan, in Japan, or in elsewhere. And we have a deputy representative from our office. Yes. In Tokyo, present in the conference over there. You can pass it to him and he can send it back to me.
Minister, may I ask you, with your strength of convincing your president to accept our invitation? We invited her too.
I'll try.
Okay. It's a promise?
I promise I'll try.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.